Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a really interesting and vital role in government, one that acts as a watchdog for the public when things go wrong. We're talking about the Ombudsman. It's an office designed to hold power accountable in ways that even our courts sometimes can't. Let's get into it.
So here's how we're going to break it down. We'll start with the basic problem of government power itself. Then we'll look at the difference between what courts do and what the Ombudsman does. After that, we'll dig into the Ombudsman's specific role, see how they actually operate, and wrap up with why all of this is so crucial for a government that's truly fair.
Okay, let's start with the fundamental challenge here. For any government to actually work, officials need the power to make decisions. But that very power, well, it comes with a risk. The risk that it'll be used in a way that feels completely unfair, even if no actual law was broken.
I mean, really think about that for a second. Have you ever dealt with a public agency and just felt like the decision they made was arbitrary or biased or just wrong? You go looking for the rule they broke, but you can't find one. This is what we call an accountability gap. It's this space where bad government actions can happen without any obvious fix.
And that gap exists because of something called discretionary power. It's basically the wiggle room given to officials to use their own judgment. And honestly, it's necessary. You can't write a law for every single possibility. A minister needs to be able to decide if something is conducive to the public good, for example. Without that flexibility, government would just grind to a halt.
But, and this is a huge but, legal experts are very clear on this point. That discretion can't be unlimited. The idea of power that can't be reviewed, well, that just doesn't fly in a democracy. It's a contradiction. All power, even the flexible, discretionary kind, has to have some kind of oversight. So the real question is, what kind of oversight?
And that brings us to a really key distinction. We tend to think of courts as the main way to check government power. And they are, but they're only looking for one very specific thing, which leaves a huge area uncovered.
See, courts are focused on illegality. Did the government break a law, yes or no? But that accountability gap we just talked about, that's where this other idea comes in, maladministration. This is a much bigger concept. It's not just about illegal actions. It's about bad administration, decisions that are unjust, biased, inefficient, or just plain unfair, even if they're technically legal.
And here's where you can really see the difference side by side. A court asks, was this lawful? If the answer is no, its decision is binding, case closed. But the Ombudsman asks a totally different question. Was this good administration? Their power isn't about issuing legal orders. It's about investigating and recommending a fair outcome. They work right in that gray area where legality stops, but fairness needs to keep going.
So to bridge this very gap, the one between what's illegal and what's just plain unfair, this special office was created. We call it the Ombudsman. Now, this idea has been around for a while. It started in Sweden, way back in 1809, as a channel for citizens to complain about the government. It took some time to spread, but by 1967, the UK had its own version, created specifically to look into these claims of maladministration. And from there, the model has really gone global. You see it everywhere, adapted for local needs, like in Nepal with their Commission for the Investigation of Abuse of Authority.
So what makes an ombudsman actually work? It really boils down to these four things. First, they have to be independent and impartial, completely free from political influence. Second, they have real teeth. They have the power to demand documents and information from pretty much anyone in government. And finally, their main function is to recommend solutions. They don't make legally binding orders, but they investigate and then suggest how to make things right.
Okay, so that's the theory. But what does this look like in the real world? How does a person's complaint actually lead to an investigation and, hopefully, a fair outcome? Let's walk through it.
It usually starts pretty simply. A citizen makes a complaint. The Ombudsman's office takes a look and decides if it's something they can even investigate. If it is, they kick off a formal inquiry, gathering evidence from both you and the government department involved. At the end, they issue a detailed report. And if they agree there was maladministration, they'll recommend a fix. That could be anything from a formal apology to financial compensation.
Of course, not every country does it the exact same way. In the UK, for instance, you used to have to go through your local member of parliament to file a complaint. They called it the MP filter. But in other places, like Nepal, citizens can go straight to the office themselves.
The scope can also be different. Some look at broad maladministration, while others focus on a more specific abuse of authority.
And here's a really cool part. It's not always about just reacting. Many ombudsmen have the power to launch their own investigations without anyone filing a complaint. This lets them be proactive. If they start seeing the same problem pop up over and over again, they can investigate the entire system to fix the root cause before it affects more people.
So this all leads us to the big picture question. Maybe the most important one. Why does any of this really matter? What's the ultimate value in having an ombudsman? Well, in one word, trust. The whole point of the ombudsman is to make sure government isn't just following the law, but that it's also being fair and efficient. By giving people a free, impartial place to go when they feel wronged, it builds public confidence. It sends a message that someone is watching out for basic fairness.
Now, you might be thinking, okay, but if they can only make recommendations, how much power do they really have? Well, take a look at this. In Turkey, in 2021, government bodies followed the Ombudsman's recommendations almost 80% of the time. That shows you the incredible influence they have. Public officials really don't want to be on the receiving end of a report from a respected, independent investigator calling them out. And that's really what it comes down to. The Ombudsman is there to step in and help solve problems between regular people and massive government institutions. They're often the first stop, a much less intimidating and expensive option than taking the government to court.
So the takeaway is pretty clear. Courts make sure the government is lawful. The Ombudsman works to make sure it's fair. Together, they create a much stronger system of accountability. Which leaves us with one final question to think about. If we have those two pillars in place, what comes next? What's the next big step in building an even better, more responsive government? Thanks for joining us for The Explainer.